I'll write it and we'll do it live.
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh! Should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
Hey, good evening, and welcome to the really big Barbecue Central show. This is the show that talks about all things that are important to the world of barbecue and grilling. The show originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, Bomb City, USA, Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I am your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard here on your Tuesday evening's live fire fun and frivolity show. If you want to get in contact with me this evening or follow the show during off-show hours, here's how you do all that.
You can get in touch with the show by sending an email to Greg at BBQCentralShow.com. Follow us on all the social media channels at BBQ Central Show. And be sure to subscribe to the show podcast feed on your favorite podcast platform.
Anything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's happening in case you can get the newsletter coming up in about 12 minutes from now. He is a semi-frequent guest here on this show over the last couple of years, especially when our first Tuesday of the month regular guest is out of pocket. He is the pitmaster of Swine Life BBQ, the creator of the same named YouTube channel, and much more. It is Mark Williams joining the show. So we have plenty to talk about with Mark topic-wise. We're going to be re-delving into the long hold or the long low hold of briskets that we delved into a little bit with Malcom last month, but there was a lot of reaction from the crowd going, I need to know more about that. What kind of oven do I need? What real temperature should I be holding at? Do I need to put a water pan in my oven? Lots and lots of additional questions sparked up over that conversation last month. And since Mark was on Malcom's podcast when they originally talked about it, or at least when I originally heard about it, figured why not talk about it with Mark, since that's a topic he's well-versed on. We'll also talk about some competition stuff. Mark is a participator in Memphis in May, so we'll get his hot take on where that's sitting right now and a bunch of other stuff as well. So Mark Williams rolling and leading off the show here, coming up here shortly. And then, after Mark, we will keep it down in the Mississippi, Memphis area as we welcome back, believe it or not, Melissa Cookston to the show. I think it's been a 4-year layoff since last we had Melissa Cookston on, the winningest woman in barbecue, the pitmaster of Yazoo's Delta Q, owner of Barbecue Supply Store, owner of multiple restaurants. You know the resume. Barbecue Hall of Famer. I believe Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer as well. And we'll play a little catch-up. She's got a event coming up here, the World Junior Barbecue League World Championships. That's coming up at the end of the month. We're going to be talking about that, how that whole thing got started, why she's championing that. We'll talk a little business. We'll talk a little TV. We will also talk a little Memphis in May with her, since she's taken part in that ever since I've known her, and she's won it a couple different times as well. As far as the overall grand championship, won hog a number of times. We all know Melissa. So that'll bring a wrap to the first hour, and then we'll go to the second hour. And joining me in the leadoff segment, the co-creator of Fireboard Labs and Fireboard, the product, Ted Conrad, will rejoin us. Ted was up at the American Royal this past weekend, if you didn't know that. The Invitational and Open took place over this past weekend out there at the Kansas Speedway. Ted had a booth out there. I believe it was shared with Burnt Finger Barbecue. They had like a together booth. So we'll talk about his takeaways from the 2023 World Championship of the American Hall of Fame there at the American Royal. Of course, the Barbecue Hall of Fame ceremonies took place where the inductees and legacy members were not the inductees per se. I mean, they were all inductees, right? So the living inductees, you had the legacy inductees as well. And then the Impact Award going to Ray Basso over the Barbecue Forum. So we'll see if he got around any of that, get his takeaway from a business perspective. Because he's there as Fireboard. Like, why is he not cooking competitively there? I know that. So is he trying to snag some dealers along the way? We'll talk to Ted about all that. Plus, there's a new product that we need to talk about, so we'll give a mention to that as well. And we'll be closing the show with our pal, who is new to the show last year, but really producing some top-notch YouTube content. Not in a frequency standpoint, but when he has a topic and he's ready to talk, boy, does he dive into it and put all the science to it. Our pal at Combustion Inc., Chris Young, will join us once more. We're going to cover a topic tonight that's going to blow your mind. You've seen it all over the place. Foodies are doing it. Trained chefs have been doing it for decades and decades, if not longer than that. When they're finishing a steak in a cast iron pan, they throw globs of butter in there, and then they're basting, all that nonsense. We'll talk to Chris, who put it through the paces recently, and has information that might just shake the very foundations of how you think about a steak needs to be finished, or how a steak needs to be finished in a cast iron pan. There's some other ancillary or shoot-off topics that we're going to be touching on that are strictly related to the butter, but will become their own experiments as well, as Chris and I were doing a sound check. So very excited to get together with him and close out the show in that fashion. Mark Williams, Melissa Cookston, first hour. Ted Conrad, Chris Young, second hour. Don't forget you can follow me socially, Instagram, X, TikTok, Snapchat, all at BBQ Central Show. We say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of the video streaming platforms. You can go to Facebook or Twitch/BBQ Central Show. You can also watch on Facebook, or I'm sorry, on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show. And we do have a YouTube poll question of the week. Piggybacking off of one of the 100% assurity questions from last week that we asked the embedded correspondent and in-studio guest Jason Baker, I'm asking everybody this here this evening. Not returning your cart to the cart corral is worse than not covering your cooker. 40% of you are saying yes, but 60% of you are saying no. It's not worse. That's up for hot debate, and we're going to broach that topic with Mark Williams as we come out of the first break. I thought it would be more of a yes that it is, considering the stance I took on it. I thought a little more of you were like-minded in my thinking. And Rusty, by the way, who was even more hotly on top of saying, hey, cart corral non-returners, I don't even know if that was right English. If you're not returning your cart to the cart corral, there were only two sectors of non-humans above you as far as Rusty was concerned, murderers and rapists, and then it was people that don't return carts to the cart corral. So we'll get Mark Williams' opinion here in just a bit, and we'll continue to track the poll here through the evening, although it is now going 57% no's and 43% yeses. So let's start here this evening before we get to the first break and then welcome in the pitmaster of Swine Life BBQ, Mark Williams. Talk about creating a monster, but instead of complaining about it, I'm going to take a different approach here. I'm going to say to each and every one of you that sent me an email that sounded something like this: can someone get Jason Baker a coaster or a book or a mouse pad or something to put that coffee cup down on so it's not so loud? You're welcome. Yes, my audio snobs, thank you for validating what I have worked so hard to do, these many years, dare I say decades, which is create a generation of audio consumers who can not only discern good versus bad audio, that's hard enough, but feel comfortable enough in their own snobness to then reach out to the content creators of those shows and really let them have it. Bravo to you, Centralites. You have finally cemented yourselves into a group of audio aficionados, which not only expect good audio, you are now demanding it directly from the content creators you give your time to listen to. Why should you have to suffer through an average or usually below average audio experience anymore? It's too easy in this day and age to not have sound that is anything less than studio quality audio going through your ear holes. It's unacceptable. Thank you, Centralites. Thank you for not only hearing my message, but thank you for taking this to the next level and demanding audio that is studio quality. And if that has to be pointed out to me because Jason's coffee cup hit the desk that I've already made adjustments for the next guest. There were probably no other guests ever, but I have already made adjustments because I know you demand superior audio, withstanding no excuses. Forget it. I hear you. All right, we got Mark Williams coming up. Are you tired? Let me ask you another question. Are you tired of settling for mediocre grilling experiences? Yes. It's time to step up your game. Bring the ultimate flavor and cooker to the backyard barbecues. Pits and Spits charcoal grills offering the highest quality live fire cooking experience you can get in the market today. Using either wood or charcoal, their solid fuel grills produce those classic flavors you're looking for when you have the time to fire up the grill and cook for family and friends. With a large adjustable fuel tray, you can raise and lower the fire to control that fine-tuned heat. What? You can raise and lower the fire to control and fine-tune the heat. That's right. Their take on the very popular Santa Maria-style grills that you're seeing out there. Check them out, pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. And when you're spelling out Pits and Spits, it's the double T on the Pits and the Spits /BBQ Central, and use promo code Charcoal Central, all one word, Charcoal Central, for $150 off any charcoal grill on the website. What have we learned? Pits and Spits grills are phenomenal. You might cry as you shuck out initially, but generations will thank you. You'll be the live fire hero for great-grandkids and great-great-grandkids. And your offspring will be fist-fighting on who gets the Pits and Spits charcoal grill when you're dead. Oh, by the way, that's happening too. We're all going to die. But before we do that, save $150 off when you use promo code Charcoal Central at checkout when you're buying any charcoal grill at pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. Once again, that's pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. We're back with Mark Williams right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Broadcasting live from the Barbecue Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by cookinpellets.com, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. You visit cookinpellets.com and find out about all of their products. And then when you're ready to purchase, especially pellets, go to Lowe's.com or Amazon.com or Walmart.com. Same great selection, even better shipping rates than you can get on cookinpellets.com. And Chris Becker tells me to say that. It's not some scam or weirdo deal. All on the level, cookinpellets.com, and then buy from Amazon.com, Lowe's.com, or Walmart.com. My first guest tonight, an award-winning championship pitmaster, an aspiring YouTube star, and might be one of the very few I eat milk cows and like it guys out there today. We welcome back our friend, Mark Williams. All right, Mark, so we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking all guests and all watchers of the show through YouTube and Facebook if they're looking at it, which is this: not returning your cart to the cart corral is worse than not covering your grills and cookers, yes or no?
Man, I can go ahead and tell you, if you're not returning your card, you're not covering your pit up either. So, or maybe not even brushing your teeth. So,
yes, I mean, come on. You are a terrible human being by all accounts. I didn't even think about that, Mark. But if you had to discern who's worse, is not cover the grill guy worse, or is not returning the cart to the cart corral guy worse?
I'm going to say not returning the cart.
Yes, of course.
I got to go with that.
Of course. But 62% of YouTube watchers and voters are saying no. They don't think it's worse than not covering your grill. But I wholeheartedly disagree. I'm solely in the Mark Williams camp on this. But somehow we will move on with this conversation. So first of all, always happy to have you stop by the show and lend your live fire takes here. So appreciate you making time. I'm not here to beat a dead milk cow. But, Mark, you were supposed to be having a line on milk cows for like a year now. I mean, what's a gal got to do to get some milk cow meat in his hands?
So, if it was in my backyard, I could get them to you. But I have to go to Indiana to get them, and it's been hectic. So, 100% my fault. I will get you a milk cow ribeye at some point or another.
What's made it even worse is that last time Jess Pryles was on, so we're going about 3 months from now, she was traveling around. Maybe she was in New Zealand or maybe it was Australia, her hometown. And she made special mention, unprovoked, of having a milk cow and went on to explain that it had a very dynamic taste, not in a bad way, was smaller, like you've mentioned. And I said, geez, I only know one other person on the whole face of the earth that's had milk cows and really touted them. So that made me even more anxious to get my hands on milk cows. So do we see it by the end of 2024 or 2023, or is it more like by the end of 2024?
So I know I'll be up there 2 more times this year, for sure, before the end of the year. And how far are you from South Bend?
That's on the way to Indy. It's probably 3 hours.
We can make it happen. Worst case, I will drive it to you.
We're going to meet somewhere that makes sense for both of us. We're going to have milk cow steaks. Oh, my God. This is going to be great. All right, I'm going to hold you to it.
Consider it done.
If you don't do it, I'll just bring it up every other time you're on the show, and then at some point we'll either do it or we won't. Do you have any opinions? Because you're a big Memphis and May guy. You have been for a very long time, competing at part of the How to Barbecue Right team. I think you've probably competed by yourself as well, right? Or you don't even compete with Malcom during Memphis and May, do you? You do it on your own.
No, we compete with Malcom, or I cook with Malcom. Let me rephrase that. So that's a team effort on that one.
This has been a year unlike any other from a news perspective and a host's perspective. It's been the best year ever because it seems like every week or every few days there's a new piece of content that's coming out about what's happened over this past 2023 Memphis and May with all the damage. And you have one side of it where Memphis and May seems to be very tight-lipped about releasing any information or any of their thoughts on how this whole thing has happened, except that they've received a huge damage bill. They've filed a claim with their insurance company, and that's all we know. And then you have Memphis River Parks, who is freely flowing with their opinions, with what the facts are according to them, writing through various news media outlets through WREG. They email back and forth with me. The CEO replied back to a comment I had on a LinkedIn post one time. So they're freely exchanging opinions there. As someone who takes part in it, especially this one this past year, was it as bad as it's being made out to be, especially for the folks that weren't there, number one? And then number two, it's not going back to Tom Lee Park. That's been voted on by all the different competition cooks through a vote that took place, I think it was late last week, and the results were back Friday. So it's going to Liberty Park. We'll get to that here in a second. But what did you think as you were leaving? Did it seem decimated?
No, not even close. I mean, yeah, it was muddy, but it's grass. Like, come on now. Like, fix the grass. Don't worry about it. They talked about all the landscape being tore up. It was all fenced off and marked off anyway. You couldn't get to it. And it's a crock, man.
What about the amount of cement? $500,000 in cement. I think there was $300,000 or $400,000 in asphalt. $80,000 in irrigation systems, and the list goes on.
It sounds like they half-assed done it to begin with. I mean, plain and simple, if concrete can't hold up to a barbecue trailer, then you need to find another concrete guy.
Going to Liberty, I think it was Liberty Park was the place that was voted on. 77% of cooks said that that's where they wanted to go. So excuse my ignorance here, but is this one and the same as Tiger Lane or Tiger Alley or whatever they call it?
Yeah, it's Tiger Lane.
Tiger
And
Lane.
I'm not looking forward to that either because it was horrendous last time I was there. But I don't know what people love about that place other than you got to avoid bullets and gunshots. But other than that, I mean, I guess if you want to cook barbecue there, go for it.
So in your estimation, this is not necessarily the most savory part of town from a safety standpoint.
No, not even close. Which, I mean, really, I mean, it's bad to say, but Memphis itself has just gotten so it's gotten so bad here lately. I try to stay out of Memphis as much as I can, and you know, it's not my cup of tea. So I don't look forward to it being at Tiger Lane. We'll go up there and do what we got to do, but it's not going to be the same as being on the river. And there's so many other venues I feel like that are way better. So I don't really look forward to it.
I was trying to remember some of the other options. There didn't seem to be a host of other options, maybe 3, maybe 4 that the cooks were voting on.
Yeah, I think it was the Agri Center. Not sure really why that wasn't kind of considered more, but just because of the location wise. Then the other was the old Memphis Motorsports Park, which logistically I could see where that would take a lot to make that happen. I mean, Tiger Lane is set up for it. It's just the location is terrible because there's really nowhere to stay. There's not really that many restaurants close by, so you're gonna have to stay miles away, and it's not the same. I mean, the river is what makes Memphis a May, and I'll stand by that.
We'll see what happens. I'm very excited to see how this whole thing turns out. I would like to dig a little bit further into this thing that Malcom and I talked about last month, which was a topic that I got from listening to his podcast, which you were a part of at that point. And I'm calling it the long holding of brisket. So I've heard you get the brisket off, hold it for an hour at least, hold it for 4 hours at least. This one was quite a departure. Hold it for 12 hours or 16 hours
24.
at 24 at 150 degree oven or 160 degree oven. So where were you hearing about this first, or is this something that you just normally practiced? And then how can we implement it into our own brisket cooks at home to give it a try?
Well, a lot of it goes back to the Texas style restaurants. You know, they're cooking, to my best of my knowledge, they're cooking, you know, the briskets today for tomorrow. So they're cooking them during the day, throwing them in a proofing oven, setting at whatever temp they desire, 140, 150, and holding them at least 12 hours. And you know, as long as you're above that 140, which me personally, I would like to be around 160, you know, you're safe. But I've done it. I've done it up to about 18 hours, probably the longest I've ever held one. I've held one in a sous vide much longer, but it changes the brisket game, man. It's all that fat renders, and it's one of the most, I guess, savory, just melt in your mouth briskets I believe you could have.
So you've just brought up a whole new topic that I didn't think we were going to get into, and I'm going to try and remember and circle back to that, which was the sous vide brisket. We've talked about sous vide a couple different times with various sous vide experts, but this might be a little different spin on that. So when you're taking it off, does it have to be in butcher paper? Does it have to be in foil? Does it not matter? It's just got to get into that oven around 160 degrees and then just let it go to sleep for 12 or 24 hours?
So as long as you don't have a heavy airflow or like a strong convection, so if you're using your oven at home, I would say I would want to tin it at least if the convection fan is on, because you don't want to dry it out. If it's just a proofing oven designed for that, I've held them, you know, just open in a pan. I've held them in butcher paper. I've held them in foil. It really doesn't matter because you're just creating a moist environment. Those proofing ovens that I've used before actually have a steam water tray in the bottom that you fill it up with water, set it to 150, and you walk away. And it gives it all the time in the world for everything just to calm down. And the brisket actually gets more tender, but it doesn't fall apart, if that makes sense.
So when you get it off the cooker, get it into the oven, these proofing ovens that you're talking about, at least the ones that I've seen, I have a couple buddies that own barbecue restaurants here locally, Cleveland, that are actually very good. But there is some type of humidity element in these alto shams or whatever the hell you call them. I don't have that available. So I can get my oven down to even 150 or 140 degrees, but there's no humidity element to that. So do I want to stick a pan of water in there? I mean, it's not going to be at a rolling boil by any stretch of the imagination. So is it really adding anything to that, or is that just making me feel good?
So as long as you don't have a fan on, like your convection fan, as long as it's just on standard bake at 170 or 150 or however low your oven can go, no bigger than that oven is, it's going to create its own moisture from the brisket. So you'll be fine. When you open it up in the morning, steam will come out of that oven.
Have you found a sweet spot in regards to both hold time and when you feel that brisket has been the best at these extended hold testings?
Not really a sweet spot. I would say the best I've actually done and cooked, and I thought was like, dang, like that's one for the books. That's one you'll remember, was about 14 hours. And it just happened to be an A9 from Kevin, and it was out of this world. I mean, it was one of them deals like you would hurt yourself eating it. It was so rich, but you wanted to go back for more. And you'd say, all right, I'm done. And you go back for more. So it was one of them punish you briskets.
Is it a whole packer that you're cooking like this?
Yeah, the way I do that, yes.
Yeah. So if you don't have an oven that you can spool back to holding temperatures, let's say, it's 800, maybe it's 200 degrees. I think the first oven I ever had might have started at 200, maybe even 225. Is there anything you can do to overcome that, or do you want to look at doing a hold in a whole different environment at that point?
It's going to be tough because 200 is going to take the chance of really overcooking that brisket. So I would try just until you can, I'd say 175 would be as high as I'd want to go. So until you can get that. Now, my oven only go to 170. And so what I do is actually take a pan and put it in a pan, and I put another pan on top of it, just flip it upside down and kind of shield it. And I've actually left a dot in there on top of it. It'll stay about 160. And check your oven, because most ovens aren't that accurate. So you might be good. So you might be around the 175, even though it is saying 200.
For what about doing the cooler method? Is that not a great option? Dry cooler, towels,
you're good for
air gaps.
Safely 6 hours. And I would leave a thermometer in it just to watch it. Once you hit that 140, get it out. You got to either go in the refrigerator or eat it, one of the two. So I would say 6 to 8 hours max in the cooler if it is a good insulated cooler.
Now, from a brisket cooking perspective, you're more, at least for competitions, you've adopted more of a hot and fast style?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're doing regardless?
Usually,
if you're making brisket in the backyard, like if you're going to make one of these hold briskets, are you hot and fast with that as well?
If I'm going to be up with it, yes, I'm cooking hot and fast. If it's a set it and forget it, throw it in the pellet grill, I'll throw it around 200, 225 and go to bed. But if I'm going to be up with it, say I'm cooking it during the day, yes, I'm going to be hot and fast.
For a backyard eating brisket, what are the key points in cooking a not only good, but I think good also needs to be linked in with consistent. So how do you get those together, in your opinion?
The first thing is know the pit. So whatever you're cooking on, make sure you're comfortable and confident with that pit, because you definitely don't want to over smoke brisket. And be patient, because that's the key with brisket. Everybody asks like, man, my brisket was tight. Well, you're not patient. You're not allowing yourself enough time. So be patient, give you plenty of time, and always plan for rest. Like I said, we can hold a brisket 6 to 8 hours. So if it gets done early, who cares? But just get it tender. And I mean, don't be scared of salt and pepper. That's what everybody runs, but make it your own.
When I was getting into the barbecue arena, there was a lot of impetus put on specific internal time or internal temperature measurements. You got to get it to 2004 degrees. It's nothing. You got to get it to
It'll be
204.
tender.
You got to get it to 210 or something like this. And then it started to dial back to use the number as a guide, but you want to stick the probe in, and if it's probing like butter. I mean, I don't even know what this means. It seems like there's such a short window to either get it's like butter to now it's gone into pot roast. So what's the magic there?
I think it's, again, we've talked about this before, is the temperature you're cooking at. The lower temperature you cook, the lower the finish temp's going to be. So temperature is a guideline, but just know in the back of your mind, if you're 250 and under, you probably need to start checking that brisket at about 205. If you're 250 and over, it's going to go to 208, 210. I mean, I've had briskets go to 212. So that is the biggest thing. And I kind of look at it a different way. A lot of people, it's like, I don't want to spend the money on a Wagyu or a prime brisket because I'm scared I'm going to screw it up. Well, they have such more room for error on those better quality briskets where you're most likely not going to screw it up. But a select grade, you have a very small window that it's going to be dry or tough. So that's where you get gun shy at that point because you're cooking a cheaper brisket, but it's a lot easier to screw a cheaper brisket up than it is a good brisket.
What's the competition season been like for you in 2023?
It's been busy. It kind of snowballed into something I really wasn't expecting. I told you earlier, we've done a lot of practicing for Memphis May cooking hog, and guess what? It is October, and I'm still cooking hogs, and we're going to finish the MBN year out and just kind of see where the cards lay. We've got a good run in ribs. Hog, we don't really have a chance to take first over. The two guys in front of me are pretty much dominating. We've had a great year cooking, and we learned a lot, but we're going to make a push for ribs these last 5 contests.
Is there a shot at you getting overall Memphis Barbecue Network Team of the Year?
No. Most likely a hog team will take that just because the points are so much higher. The only thing we have a shot in is if we continue to do good and have a little bit of luck on our side, we may be able to get a first place Team of the Year rib, maybe. But that's a long shot. We still got 5 contests to go.
Will you try and parlay this newfound infatuation with Memphis Barbecue Network into next year and making a push to win?
It's a possibility. We're going to see how it goes. I mean, I still love KCBS because I always want to cook KCBS enough to try to go back to the Jack every year. So, we're going to do a handful of those. We really didn't get an opportunity to this year. We cooked a few, but it's the good thing about MBN. It's in my backyard.
Yep.
I mean, most contests are within an hour of me, so that's convenient. You can go down there, cook one meat, not really have a lot of pressure on you, and just go have a good time and fellowship.
From the KCBS standpoint, you mentioned you like to cook it so you can get out to try your best to cook the Jack every year. American Royal took place this past weekend. If you had the choice to win American Royal Invitational or Jack Daniel's overall grand championship, which one do you choose and why?
Jack all day long.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
I mean, because the odds are stacked against you. So unless you get an auto, you still got to be lucky. You still have to win a state championship, and you still have to get your bung to be draw. So the odds of you getting to the Jack are just so much further out there, in my opinion. It's so hard to get to that level. And, it's definitely, I think the competition is way stouter at the Royal, no doubt. But it's something about the Jack. And, I mean, I've always been fascinated with the Jack, and it's one of them things. It's the memorabilia. It's the being in the hollow. It's just the location, the time of year. That's the best time to cook barbecue, in my opinion.
Mark Williams is the pitmaster of Swine Life BBQ, the website, so you can pick up some of his swag and some of his rubs, swinelifebbq.com. Mark, always appreciate the time. Thanks for coming in tonight.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, Greg. Have a good one.
It's Mark Williams right there. Friend of the show, always doing a great job when Malcom is not available to come in. So a lot of good brisket tips there, and we'll wish him good luck as he chases down MBN rib team, or first in the ribs. So we wish him good luck. Melissa Cookston is ready to go. Get to her in just 1 second. Before we do that, what do we love about ceramic cookers? We love that they are fuel efficient. Yes, we love that they can achieve low and slow temperatures for traditional barbecue meats. We also love that they can get very hot for the temperature, for the traditional temperature, high heat temperatures of grilling steaks and other thin cuts. But what's missing in the everyday ceramic cooker lineup? The real ability to do true two-zone cooking. Two-zone cooking is very important to both professional backyard cooks alike. It's the best way to manage a fire and cook with confidence. However, getting a two-zone fire in a round ceramic cooker is not very realistic. Why? Because it's round. And a Primo grill in the game-changing oval design, the shape gives you the ability to execute a two-zone setup that you desire. It also gives you the other ceramic grill benefits as well. 60 different ways to cook on this thing. All the accessories that you want, but only sold through dealers. So find one near you. Go to the website, primogrill.com. That's primogrill.com. Use the dealer locator and then check out that store. See all the different size ovals and pick the one that's best for you. Don't forget to outfit yourself with all those accessories that they probably have, and away you go. You'll be a convert very quickly, just like me. primogrill.com. That's primogrill.com. We're back with Melissa Cookston right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
And we thank Mark Williams for joining us last segment. This portion of the show being brought to you by Fireboard. Monitor up to 6 different temperatures simultaneously. Connect to Wi-Fi for cloud-based monitoring. If you have Alexa or the Google Assistant in your home, Fireboard fully integrated with both. Find out more by visiting fireboard.com or call 816-945-2232. And we'll talk to Ted Conrad in just under an hour from now. My next guest, known as the winningest woman in barbecue, written books, starred in numerous television shows, owns restaurants, also has a barbecue supply store, and after Memphis in May this year has called it a competition career and officially retired. I'm excited to welcome back friend of the show, Melissa Cookston. So we got plenty to talk about, Melissa, but before we do any of that, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking all guests and everybody watching, which is this. Is not returning your cart to the cart corral worse than not covering your grills and cookers?
It's all just real bad.
Yes, of course. This is terrible. Mark Williams and I were just discussing if you're not returning carts to the cart corral, there's a really good chance you're probably not covering your grills as well. It's a mark of a terrible human.
Yeah, I think I'm probably better at returning my carts to the corral than I am covering my grills.
Yes, well, I mean, that's why you're a wonderful human. The cart to the cart corral. 60% of the people watching on YouTube, however, are in disagreement with us so far, saying that it's not worse than not covering your grills, but we'll see how that tracks through the rest of the show. So, as I had mentioned in the open, you've officially retired from the competition barbecue scene. If you look back over your storied career, are there one or two things that stand out to you specifically over and above everything else that you've accomplished?
The Hall of Fame induction was I'm not a crier, and I teared up during that. So that's one. And then winning Memphis in May is always like the first time. So both of those things were pretty epic for me.
Is Pete retired from competition barbecue as well?
That's a good question. You'll have to ask him that. Yeah.
See,
yeah.
I don't know how many people know that, prior to your dominance, Pete was cooking competition barbecue prior to you getting on board. And then you created a whole bunch of great success, won a whole bunch of world titles and all this other stuff. So hearing you retiring is one thing, but wondering if Pete is retiring could be a whole different thing altogether.
Yeah, he and my daughter, they asked me consistently, "Are you sure? Are you sure?" I'm like, I'm damn sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Were you at the Royal this past weekend?
I was not. I had a conflict, so this is the first time I haven't been in a few years.
Would you show up just to hang out and see people, or will you just stay
That's
away?
all I do.
Yeah.
I cooked it twice. It's hard for me to go to competitions and not turn boxes in.
Yeah.
But it's a huge family reunion. It is one of the best events that I've ever been to. It's fantastic.
So we talked about Memphis in May being the last of the competitions, and obviously this year was a little weird. I was asking Mark Williams about what he thought. Just from your perspective, as you were leaving there this year, was the damage as extensive as you read in these damage reports and then subsequent invoices to Memphis in May, in your opinion?
Not in my opinion, no. And I mean, how much do weeds and wildflowers cost? I mean,
Weeds cost zero for me to plant in my front yard. I can tell you that.
I don't know.
It's so Tom Lee Park is out. Well, we've seen that. I've gotten some emails from some of the other barbecue cooks that were being corresponded with through the Memphis and May folks, and they were voting on a new place to go. Tiger Lane or Tiger Alley is the new place. Is that acceptable, or do you think this is a temporary home while they try and find whatever the new forever home is going to be for Memphis and May? And does it need to be in Memphis, or can the competition move somewhere else and still be Memphis and May?
You know, I know that attendance was down both years that they had it at Tiger Lane in 2011 and then more recently. So I think that, you know, that is a huge concern. People obviously don't want to go to Tiger Lane to visit or partake of the barbecue competition. So I don't think that's a viable option long term. You know, I think, you know, Memphis has always tried to move things down to DeSoto County, where I live, down in Mississippi. You know, I don't think that's been very successful. The Mid-South Fair, obviously has not done nearly as well as it did at Tiger Lane when it was over there. So, you know, that was back in the 80s and 90s. I'm just not sure. You know, I think that they're going to need to find a venue somewhere in Shelby County. You know, whether that's out, you know, toward Germantown and Cordova area. There's a nice Shelby Farms out there that might be a great option. But, you know, it's not my circus and not my clowns anymore.
That's right. And we'll continue to track that as it happens here. So let's switch gears a little bit. And during the pandemic, I found Barbecue Showdown on Netflix and watched season 1. Thought it was really good. There was a subsequent season 2 as well. How does this whole thing come to you? Are you actively seeking to get on television, or are you fielding a phone call saying, "Hey, Melissa, we'd love to pitch you an idea on a show"?
You know, I'm not comfortable being in front of a camera. So I don't seek opportunities like I should. I get fussed at a whole lot by a lot of people. You know, I don't like crowds for sure. I don't like standing up talking in front of people. I don't actively seek this. I would say 0. And I turn down probably 95% of the things that come my way just because it's not in my comfort zone.
So is it just the whole publicness that isn't in the comfort zone, or is it also opportunity coupled with the fact that maybe it's not the most comfortable thing to you makes it easier to turn down?
I'm just not one of those people who seeks the limelight. I don't, you know, I hate the haters, you know, and they show up every time that you put yourself out there. And I think that they feel like that if you put yourself out there, that they, you know, have the right to jump on and say whatever it is that they feel like they need to be heard about. And, you know, for me, it's hard for me to put myself out there.
So you decide to go with the show, and now we're in, you've done season 2. What do you like about these 2 shows or these 2 seasons versus any of the other television you've done? How are they similar? How are they different?
Well, obviously, there's people wanting to compete and cook good food. I think with the Barbecue Showdown, the thing that I like about it is there's no drama created. You know, it's really just an evolution of a barbecue competition over 8 episodes. And casting does a fantastic job of getting our competitors. Our executive producer, Daniel Callan, is one of the best. He is so passionate about that show. And he's done some other great work. And, you know, he really allows us to be who we are. You know, he thinks about, you know, what would Melissa do? Which, you know, is important to me. So, you know, there's not a big script, and the part that is scripted, he'll say, "Hey, do you want to change any of this? Does this look right?" Which for me is important because I want to make sure that I don't have somebody in New York or LA trying to sound like me.
Do you get a lot of input on how the show's running or what the concept for the second season is going to be versus the first season?
Yeah, I would say on the third season is I've been asked a lot more, but I've always, he's just so cool. He's, what do you think about this? And I always have an opinion, but he's just so easy to work with, and he takes what I say and uses it usually. So
Let's switch gears to business. You have this barbecue supply store. I'm wondering if I had a Barbecue Central barbecue sauce or some type of knick-knack. Do I have the ability to reach out to a Melissa Cookston, or maybe you have a designated buyer that I can get into the store, or is there a different process for that?
you're setting me up here, aren't you?
Well, I have nothing. I have nothing to sell. I'm just wondering. I'm sure
No,
somebody else does.
but there are 5 million other people that do that
Yeah.
listen to your show.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we get stuff dropped off a lot. We get stuff in the mail a lot. And I get a lot of emails. And really it kind of comes down to what will sell. It's not a grill, it can't sit there for 2 years. There's a shelf life on it. So, it has to move. So we have to work together in order to figure out a marketing plan in order to get it to move. And, I sell my rubs and sauces to other people. So I know what that's like and how difficult that can be in some markets.
How are you able to determine, or is it just best guess and industry experience when you're bringing something in, you think it's going to move, pretty well as you bring it in?
It is a total shot in the dark
Wow.
sometimes. I've been very lucky in a lot of aspects of the restaurant and the retail store too, but I've made some bad calls. I've had to fill the garbage cans up a couple times. That's all right. But I've been really surprised pleasantly by a lot of things too. So, this is my first foray into retail, and it's fun. I'll tell you, it's my fun job.
What cookers are selling well out of your store?
Primos, Traegers, those are my top two.
There is a World Junior Barbecue League Championship coming up that I want to talk about here over the next couple minutes. Tell me a little bit about this whole thing, how it comes together, and what's going to be happening at the end of the month.
Yep. October the 21st, we will have the World Junior Barbecue League World Championship. We have a team from Guatemala and a team from Cayman Brac, which is a smaller island outside of Grand Cayman. But we went to those places and had these competitions this year, and the winners will be here. And I'm also bringing some celebrities. So 8 contestants from Barbecue Showdown and a few from Barbecue Pitmasters. And they're going to come cook, do sampling. We're just going to have a great time while these kids compete, ages 14 to 18. And I will tell you, Greg, they can cook their ass off.
So is this something that you devised? Like, I want to help kids learn how to cook, or just a passion to give back? How does the whole thing come to be in the beginning?
I was asked to judge the Texas State Barbecue Championship for Food Network. And, the only teenagers I'd been around are the ones that worked for me. And, so I wasn't real interested. But I went, and I realized very quickly that these kids thought they were cooking barbecue, but they were learning so much more. The core values, life skills. They were just so respectful, and they really wanted to talk about their philosophies of cooking barbecue. And I said, you know what? There's more places than the state of Texas that need to be doing this. So I came home and started the foundation. Of course, then COVID hit. So we've had 3 years of the World Championship. It's a $25,000 purse for these kids.
Wow. We have a couple minutes left. I am going to end on this question. I asked Mark the same thing. Maybe you heard the tail end of it. We had American Royal this past weekend. Jack Daniels is coming up here. To win one or the other, either the Invitational or the Jack Guaranteed. Which one do you take and why?
They're both invitationals. I think in order to, when you get there, you've done something. I'll take a win anytime I can get it. If there's 3 teams there, I don't care. I want to win. The Jack has such a stigma attached to, walking up that hill with your banner and eating at the lodge and eating at Miss Mary Bobo's in the square and going to the Jack Daniel's distillery, that I find you don't have that at the Kansas City Royal. But the American Royal is so huge.
Yeah.
There's so many people there that I think you feel like you've won maybe a little more, just because, the open people are there as well for the Invitational. So you feel like you've beat 1 million people when you win that. So I might take the American Royal.
Melissa Cookston is here talking to us. You can go to her website, melissacookston.com, see what she's up to. And don't forget about the World Junior Barbecue League World Championships. That's taking place on October 22nd. And we'll be looking to see who ends up winning that. I'm happy to share that on the show the following Tuesday as well. Melissa, great to catch up with you. It's been too long. The last time you were on the show, I'm embarrassed to say, May 2018. Shame on me, Melissa. What am I doing over here? It's outrageous.
You didn't invite me to the party. And what did I say? I never seek opportunities to be on camera.
Well, lesson learned, and I will make sure that doesn't happen again. Always appreciate the time. Thanks so much for coming on, Melissa.
Thanks, Greg.
That's Melissa Cookston right there. Back and better than ever, weighing in on all topics, and always happy to have her on the show. I can't believe. See, I'm always under the impression that things are, 2 or 3 years ago, but in actuality, indeed not. 4 years. Wait, my math is bad. 5 years. Here's a new poll question of the week. Am I really bad at math? Yes. May 2018. That's 5 years. I'm sorry. So, I will not let that happen again. Number 1. Number 2, great interview as always. I'm very interested to see what happens at that World Junior Barbecue League World Championship on October 21st. All right, let's go ahead and get ready to wrap the first hour. I got some emails to get through here, so stick with me. We'll be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, we thank Melissa Cookston for joining us last segment. MelissaCookston.com, her website. If in town, check out her barbecue supply store. On the Netflix, Barbecue Showdown. She wrote a great barbecue book, Smoking in the Boys' Room. Acclaimed. And she believes that people that are not returning their carts are worse than people who don't cover their grills. By the way, agreed. Agreed. Jamie is writing the show. Greg goes on and on about his hosting abilities. Also, Greg, oops, let me take you off mute as I host this live show I was just bragging about. Just kidding, brother. I do admire your interview skills very much. Regards, Jamie. Jamie, thank you for writing it. And you're not kidding. Why is this just playing incessant? I guess I usually have a couple more minutes. You know what? I'll just wait. Dennis in Colorado is writing in. Greg, first of all, the background change is awesome on the video. It was great to see Jason Baker in your studio. I'm glad he stood up to the giant and came out on the other side stronger. I was happy that the segment got extended. What a great interview. Great correspondence segment. Loved it. Instead of Embers TV, I'd rather see Barbecue Central Show TV. Outstanding show. Regards, Dennis. Dennis, the embedded correspondent from Colorado, officially unofficial, by the way. I don't know if we're going to be having Barbecue Central Show TV ever. I have reached out to Bradley Robinson from Chud's Barbecue. He's part of that Embers TV. Tried to get him on tonight, actually, but his significant other is celebrating a birthday, so he has a life, and he wasn't able to join us tonight. Also, I leveraged him to let Jeremy Yoder know, who's Mad Scientist Barbecue on the YouTubes and social media, that I'm looking for an interview. I think he was one of the main creators of Ember Television, if I'm not mistaken. I might be mistaken. And then, of course, Matt Groark is coming up here in the next week or so. So we'll be covering a lot of Embers TV, or at least by one person. I didn't get a return booking from Brad yet, but I imagine we'll see him before the end of the year. Nick in New York City is writing in. Greg, I am a new listener, about a year to the show. I have heard you mention rules of the show a few different times. Are those posted somewhere? And how many rules are there? I want to make sure I am following the rules of my day-to-day life. Podcast listener only. Nick in the Big Apple. Nick, I'm glad you asked. Why, absolutely there are rules to the show. They number 5 at this point, but the list can grow at any point if the rule makes sense. Number 1 rule, no names, please. That means we're not calling anybody out by name. If we say rule number 1 applies in this case, that's what we mean. No names, please. We're not using anybody's name on this show. Number 2, don't get hooked. What does that mean? It means maybe you're having a back and forth. Maybe you don't realize it, but somebody who's interacting with you might be doing it in an antagonistic type way, trying to draw you into a fight. Don't get hooked. Be better than that. Be the bigger person. Number 3, probably the most common used rule on this show. If it's free, it's me. Yeah, that's right. A rule that should apply to everything in life. If it's free, it's me. Implement it immediately. Rule number 4, if the meat is good, something good is going to happen. Absolutely. Brought to you by Kit Polk of Canned Heat. Man, that's an amazing pull by me. I can't believe I just got that off the top of my head. But I remember a rule when it was spawned. And rule number 5 is brought to you from my mom, Connie Rempe, Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer. Don't snappy snap on the Snapchat. Don't do that. Many, many years ago, she said, don't snappy snap on the Snapchat. That's rule number 5. So once again, very quickly, no names, please. Don't get hooked. If it's free, it's me. If the meat is good, something good is going to happen. Don't snappy snap on the Snapchat. Nick, those are the rules. Implement them in your daily life starting tomorrow, since you're a podcast listener only, because you're going to get hour number 1 tomorrow, Wednesday, as you're listening to this. At whatever time that is, at the end of this hour, you are now rules savvy to the show. There have been at least 3 different times over the last 5 years where a new rule has been proposed. It's been good enough to implement, and I've totally forgot it. That's my fault. I want to say I got to keep a pad of paper by me, but all I really need to do is open up my phone and either type it into the phone notes app or voice record it. I should have a potential rules voice folder and just spit them into there so I don't forget them. Some of them were good, I think. Nevertheless, the same 5 rules that have been around for 10 plus years are still in effect. Rules do not change. The rules list will only grow as time goes on. There's your first hour. When we come back, we will have the top of the second hour takes. We'll get you all set up, and then we have a couple great interviews coming up as well. So why don't we do this? I'm going to refresh my libation. I suggest you do the same. And then let's say we all meet back here in about 45, 50, 60 seconds. That's a minute. And then we'll have hour number 2 of the show. Why not? Good idea? We'll see you then.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show.
Hi, this is Austin Parsons, pitmaster with Smoky Mountain Q in Nashville, Tennessee, and you are listening to the Barbecue Central Show.
Happy to have you aboard here for the really big barbecue show.
Boing.
We cook because we have to, and we grill because we want to.
Hit me.
Fine, how's it going?
You have a great show. I'm a big fan.
Boing.
So what seems to be the problem here? This man looks like he's dead, and he's in the crackle.
Charbono! It's all about the charbono, dude!
Succulent fish. What?
He ate 2 feet for wiener.
But listen, Lavernius, shut your face.
I'm shaking like a dog shit peach seeds.
We have top men working on it right now. Top men.
All right, welcome into the second hour. We are here. We have done it once again. We've made it into hour number 2 of the Barbecue Central Show, where we only talk about the most important items of the barbecue and grilling industry. The show originating from
Palm City, USA, Cleveland.
Still to come on the show this evening, Ted Conrad in about 13 minutes from now. Chris Young is going to close out the show 35 past the hour. We say good evening to those of you watching this show tonight through one of our video streaming platforms. You can go to Facebook or Twitch/BBQ Central Show. You can also watch on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show. We have a new YouTube poll question of the week, and I am shocked, dare I say, aghast at the percentages that are being puked up on here during the poll. Not returning your cart to the cart corral is worse than not covering your cooker. 62% of you are saying no, it's not worse. I'm shocked. I'm appalled. We will continue asking our guests, which, by the way, 100% of guests are agreeing with me that not returning your cart to the corral is worse than not covering your grill. Why wouldn't you cover your grill? But why wouldn't you return the cart to the cart corral? Why wouldn't you do both? I mean, why are we picking one over the other? I don't want to be hypocritical, but I do love to live there. But given the distinction, or making a distinction between the two, not returning the cart to the cart corral proves what kind of a human you are, to say the least. And we will continue to update the percentages as we move on. Coming up on the best moments of the Barbecue Central Show in 10 minutes or less this coming Friday, episode 302, taking you back to September 9th, 2008. And this time around, we are featuring me and a guy by the name of Walt from Wilton. Walt mentioned a number of weird things. So let me back this up here just for a second. Back in 2008, through many years of the show, I used Skype as an interface, both for 2 different ways. I would connect to guests that way, and then Skype also offered you a landline number opportunity, so I would give out a number. It used to be 216-220-0966 was the hotline number. You could call in, ask questions on the show. People rarely called in, especially as the show continued to mature in age and decorum. I think people were a little nervous about jumping on, possibly sounding a little bit like a maroon to the barbecue and grilling public. They cared. However, in the early days, there didn't seem to be the same amount of reserve on these callers. For instance, this guy, Walt from Wilton, he calls in, mentions a number of weird things during the call, was asking me where I was from up in that area, because I'm from Saratoga Springs originally. Grew up there until middle of 6th grade when we moved to Cleveland, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame City. Was asking, are you related to? It was very weird, stalky, kind of. And ultimately, he works his way around to how he barbecues horses. This show was a request from a fan who does seem to point out, as I was listening to John talk the show out, I was a little bit put off by the fact this guy was talking about barbecuing horses, which is counter to my longtime stance on being pro horse meat eating. And by that, I mean being able to secure a choice to either eat horse meat or not eat horse meat, which we're not allowed to do at all legally at the moment. There is no choice. You can't eat horse meat here in the States. You either have to go to Canada, you got to leave the country. I think you can do it in Mexico. Certainly you can do it in France and Germany. A lot of European countries you can eat horse, but you can't do it here. So that's what I'm talking about when I say pro horse meat eating, getting the choice to do that. I don't think the groundswell and the beginnings of horse meat like what was that? All right, hold on. Stand by. It was the 3 million download sign. It fell. Looking all around, trying to find what potentially fell off. I'm looking right at it. And finally, I realized, well, that's not in the right place. It was the 3 million download sign that my parents and my sister sent me when the show crossed over 3 million downloads. Oh, my. Look, let me get back to the point I'm trying to make here. Walt from Wilton calls in. I appear to be put off. Have then been pro-choice on let's have a choice to eat horse meat or not. This horse meat movement didn't happen for many years after that. So that's something that we grow into. So don't be colored in any way about my issue with Walt. I hung up on. I don't want to ruin it, but I just did. But it's still worth the listen. Notwithstanding Walt from Wilton, and I don't even know if we're withstanding him or not, a legendary caller in the early years of the show, Dan from Wauchula, also makes an appearance during this episode. Dan, in my mind, is an absolute legend when it comes to the old-time callers to the show. I have no idea what's happened to Dan, but I hope he's doing well. Also, it gives you a peek into what kind of show was happening almost 15 years ago, which you may or may not like. So look forward to the best moments of the Barbecue Central show, where you will not only get a Walt from Wilton workaround horse McGillicuddy, but you will also get a call from Dan from Wauchula and his pal Weasel. It's great. You're going to want to listen to it. You can subscribe to the show by visiting thebbqcentralshow.com/subscribe, and then use one of the ways to do that. And don't forget, if you want to hear a guest or segment again you think's been lost in the archives, email John, Jon, at thebbqcentralshow.com and ask what you would like to hear, because that's exactly what you're getting this coming Friday. It's a show request. And there was another one that I saw in the hopper as well. Before we get to the next guest, which will be Ted Conrad from Fireboard, I did want to briefly mention, as I got a lot of text messages about the American Royal Open scoring issue. As I mentioned, many texts on Sunday asking if I heard what was going on during Sunday night. I was watching it happen live. Read a lot of social media posts, which I take with a grain of salt, right? Also, I read Rod Gray's post specifically talking about Sunday night and apologizing for the issues that caused the delay. I have talked with a few folks that were competing out there over this past weekend. At the moment, it appears there could be much more to the story than just some kind of technical glitch that caused the delay. However, I'm not going to be reckless and speculate on any of that until I hear back from KCBS on exactly what happened that caused this, and then potential further fallout from this glitch as they're working through some things today as well. I did ask Rod Gray for comment before the show because I told him I was going to be mentioning it tonight, but I hadn't gotten anything back at this very moment, that being 10 p.m. Eastern time at this point. So I will continue to track that and get updates from them as they give them to me, and then I will in turn give those updates to you if you're not following them socially at any point. And we'll see how it goes. But again, I heard all about it because I was watching all about it. I say congratulations to the Invitational winners and the Open winner. Ted Conrad is ready to go. We're going to be talking to him here in just 1 second. Before we get to Ted, I'm going to talk to you about Franklin Barbecue Pits. In fact, a week ago Saturday, I was in the physical presence of a Franklin Barbecue Pit over at Hartville Hardware in Hartville, Ohio. Now a certified dealer of Franklin Barbecue Pits. So now, aside from just talking about them, I got to put my hands on them and run my hands over the welds. One of the attention to detail items that I saw, you have the handle where you open the big main chamber. So a lot of times this is just a solid piece. You hike it up. If you're building momentum, it's a heavy door. I mean, it's not 900 pounds, but it's a heavy door because it's a solid piece of equipment. As you lift it, the handle itself is built to roll. So as you build momentum, you're not losing it because the handle is stuck in your hand. Now you're like jerking it up. It's a nice, smooth action. The handle just rolls in your hand, almost like a dough kneader, or as we call it, a rolling pin. What an idiot. Franklin pits are primarily made of 5/16 and 1/4-inch American-made steel. Those are strong. Anything that sees heat, engineered to be incredibly solid and should last a century or more if cared for properly. You can't overstate how important the thickness of the steel is. Guaranteed professional-grade heat retention, which is key to producing good barbecue. Every Franklin pit unique to itself. Its own patina, natural markings, even its own number badge. Franklin pits can be found at fine barbecue specialty stores in select regions of the country. And if you're a fan of the show and you happen to own such a store and you wish to become a certified Franklin dealer, you visit franklinbbqpits.com and fill out their dealer form. Now, maybe you're a fan of the show, but you want to own a Franklin barbecue pit and you don't have a certified dealer just near you. You can also visit the same website, franklinbbqpits.com, and purchase a pit right there. Your new Franklin pit will ship right to your driveway. If you have any questions along the way, make sure you use the Contact Us link at the bottom of the website. Remember, Wes Wright from cookoutnews.com has one and uses it regularly and talks about how easy it is to use. Season it up, learn how to build a fire, and learn why I say the best tasting barbecue is from an offset pit. There's just no two ways about it, my opinion. FranklinBBQPits.com. That's FranklinBBQPits.com. And we're back with Ted Conrad right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
Welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by Pit Barrel Cooker, the most unbelievable outdoor cooking device on the planet, currently available in 3 sizes, host of accessories. Doesn't matter if you're a beginner or professional, it's the cooker you want to add to the arsenal. Visit pitbarrelcooker.com. Tell them the Barbecue Central Show sent you. I mean, if you are considering a barrel-style cook, stop messing around. Go to pitbarrelcooker.com. Now, if you live on the edge, you don't mind blasting people in the package. You might want to check out the Badger Barrel instead, but either one, badgerbarrel.com, pitbarrelcooker.com, same family makes them both. You figure out which one fits your lifestyle best, and away you go. My first guest in the second hour, one of the partners who started Fireboard Labs, a longtime supporter of this show, which I appreciate. You are most likely familiar with their products, which include things like Fireboard 2, Fireboard 2 Drive, Fireboard Pro, and of course, the ever-popular Fireboard Spark. Tonight, we're talking about some new things coming down the pike in fairly short order. We're also going to be talking about this past weekend's American Royal, because he was there. Our pal Ted Conrad joins the show. Ted, before we get going tonight,
hey, Greg.
We have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody, including the YouTube people that are watching, but guests too. And it's this: not returning your cart to the cart corral is worse than not covering your grills. Do you agree?
Oh gosh, I would say covering your grills, not covering your grills is worse.
Really? All right. Well, I would say 54% of the voting public agree with you that it's not worse. However, my first two guests of the evening, myself and a number of the embedded correspondents, all believe that if you're not returning a cart to the cart corral, there's only few people that are worse than you as a human. Rapists and murderers, and then it's people that don't return carts to the cart corral. I would venture to say, though, to be contradictory, which is I always love to be, if you're not returning your cart to the cart corral, you're also probably not covering your grills because you're a despicable human.
You're a lazy human being.
Yes, I mean, what are we talking about? All right, enough of that. So you were at the American Royal this past weekend. Why does Fireboard go to the American Royal?
That's a good question. First of all, it's Friday night. The Friday night party is a lot of fun. And that is really the main thing that we do. It's for the employees, and we actually do an email blast. You probably got it too, Greg, but we do an email blast, and we invite everybody that's a Fireboard customer. And so it's really an invitation to come out, have a good time, relax. We do a bunch of cooking. So we did like 6 pork butts, 2 briskets, 20 slabs of ribs, a bunch of sausage. So it's just a big party, and it's a lot of fun. Of course, if you've been out there, you just kind of meander around and you see people all from the city that you know. So that's the main thing, is the Friday night deal. But I guess secondary to that is really, everyone's there, right? I mean, everyone's there from around the country and maybe even around the world. And so it's an opportunity to connect with some of these guys. We had a list of people we thought it'd be fun to talk to. Chasing them down a little bit, and who knows, maybe there's an opportunity to work together. Maybe there's an opportunity to generate content, and overall just partner. We have a lot of fun stuff coming up. So I think the guys that are really interested in Fireboard products, I think it's a cool chance just to be able to network with all these people, because they're all essentially right within a square mile with each other. So, and the other thing we do is just get video content and stuff like that. So, and we do the kids queue. That was the other fun thing. The 2 youngest kids did the kids queue again this year, which is a lot of fun.
How do they do?
They didn't get any, top place finishes this year, but they had fun. It was the first year for steak for my middle child, Courtney, and she had fun doing it. But we kind of learned a little bit. There's some tricks with doing steak, and so I think next year will be better. So,
is it expected that if you're a business in Kansas City, you should be going to the American Royal and throwing some kind of party?
Almost. I mean, I would venture to say a good chunk of the corporate world is out there. You have these huge tents, like the J.E. Dunn tent was huge. You've got the big Black and Beach tents. There's a lot of the big Kansas City companies, not all of them, but I would say the ones that aren't there, for example, the first one I just thought of was Garmin, but Garmin's active. They have the Garmin Marathon that's coming up here just in a week or two, or I think here, just shortly. And they're involved with so much other stuff around town too. But there's a ton of corporate presence out there at the American Royal.
You had mentioned trying to get together with some people maybe you want to partner with in some form or fashion, generate content. Certainly I get that. Is there significant business to be had there if you picked up, 20 or 30 dealers on a weekend that you wouldn't have otherwise if you didn't go, or not so much?
I don't think that we've picked up dealers there. I mean, we may have in the past. We may have found one or two. I know you and I had connected at the HPBA, where a lot of small barbecue stores and even large barbecue stores are out there at the HPBA as well. But I think the American Royal is more the competition teams. There are teams that are sponsored. Like when I saw Atlanta Barbecue Store had a big sponsored teams. So I think indirectly there might be some conversations. It's really more for, I think, influencers. If there's somebody that's really kind of wanting to generate content, a partner with some manufacturers, like us, and some really exciting tech products that we have, I think it's a good chance to connect with them. Harry Sue, I'm not sure if we talked to him this year, but he's always fun to talk to. We'll get a few videos with him, and it's always a good conversation.
What's your favorite barbecue to eat?
Oh, like what you're talking about? What type of meat, or like what place here in Kansas City?
Oh, we'll get to that here in a second. But like meat wise, what's your go-to protein?
I'd have to say ribs.
Yeah. Are you a spare rib guy or baby back?
Personally, I always cook baby backs. I guess probably they're easier to cook, and I'm not like a huge pitmaster. But no, honestly, I mean, I've had unbelievable baby back ribs. I had unbelievable spare ribs. I think almost everything out there, the competition is spare ribs.
Yep.
So everything that I sampled this weekend, Sunday around noon, there's the turn-ins, so you can kind of walk around a little bit. And of course, we partner with Burnt Finger Barbecue, and I've always loved their ribs. I mean, it's just, they took first or second, I think it was a few years back in Memphis in May, for their ribs. Mm-hmm. And it's just unbelievable. It's an amazing experience to go sample competition level barbecue. Now it's a different flavor kind of, but there's still, it's amazing. So
do you have a favorite barbecue establishment in Kansas City that you prefer?
Personally, I love Q39. Have you been to Q39, Greg?
I've only been to Kansas City once, and I tried like hell to get into Q39. That was actually when Robert McGee was still around, and tried to leverage myself a little bit, and it didn't work out. So I didn't get to go there. I've heard nothing but rave reviews. I went to Slaps. Joe Pierce hosted me, came in. The place closed down. He brought all his food out for me and the guy that I was with, and it was fabulous. And then when Plowboys Barbecue was open downtown, I met Todd Johns down there, and he hooked me up with a whole bunch of really good barbecue. But Q39 was on the list, but very hard to get into, at least when I was down there. It's probably in April or May for a volleyball contest, and just couldn't squeeze it in. What do you like the best there?
I love their brisket. It's just what their style is. I'm not sure how maybe where they source it or something, but it's unbelievable. Now, I mean, you mentioned Slaps and Joe Pierce. I mean, that really, their stuff is always just amazing, and that's a really cool spot. They've got this really cool outdoor kind of covered patio, and so if you go there in the fall or the winter, it's kind of like their heaters are going, so that's kind of a neat. And their inside place where they're serving from, the kitchen is really small. You kind of go out, you kind of meander outside, which is kind of fun.
Do you go to any other barbecue contests besides the Royal, or is it because it's kind of local, that's the one you're going to go to?
Yeah, we've been to Memphis in May once, basically once with Burnt Finger. We've been to some of the other local ones here. I think I've been to, maybe one or two other kind of random ones, but obviously American Royal is just, it's perfect for us. I used to go, before I started Fireboard, I was in the investments world, and we had a small little tent. We went out. That was when it was at the West Bottoms, like the true American Royal, the old venue. And that was an amazing spot. It was funny. One year there was a spot where the road came down, and they have those big, huge drains where the water comes out from the road. And of course we had a downpour, and we were like, it was this high in water. So it was quite the experience.
So we have some product stuff to talk about. I always love to have you on and announce something that might be coming up, or something we can at least look forward to. What are we looking at from a new product standpoint in 2023?
Yeah. Well, so this has been something we've been working on actually for a while. And
What's a while? Like 6 months or 5 years?
Yeah. Longer than I'd like to admit. But yeah, I mean, typical product development cycle, I would say, is it's going to be at least a year, maybe even a year and a half. You know, if you kind of start from when you really get going on the design, and then you get prototyping and beta versions, and then early production batch. But this has really been more than 2 years, and I can get in again. There's a lot of tech stuff we've had to really go through. Why that's kind of made that complicated. And if we're a small team, right? So we don't have teams of engineers that are all cranking on this. So we've got a kind of lean and mean group. We're able to get stuff done, but sometimes it takes just a little bit longer. But no, tonight, Greg, what I was going to share with everyone, this is really the first time we've kind of got out and shared this too. I mean, we've talked to some people at the NRA, which is the restaurant show. But we have what we're calling the Fireboard Beacon, and I have it here in my hand. And you can see this is a small device. It's essentially a wireless sensor. And so for the audience that's most likely listening, which is, cooking, barbecue, I want to just preface this by saying this is primarily geared towards restaurants and grocery stores, cold storage. However, I think there's a pretty compelling use case for really anyone. I mean, there's 2 temperature sensors inside of this. There's also humidity, and then there's also an external probe port. It's a little hard to see on my camera. You can kind of see that. So any of the Fireboard ports or the Fireboard probes will plug into this port. And so you essentially have the ability, this thing can be placed very long range. So what this does, we're calling this S1G technology. So it stands for sub 1 gigahertz. So this is transmitting at a lower radio frequency. And what happens, the lower your radio frequency is, the further the range goes. And Wi-Fi, Bluetooth is like 2.4 gigahertz. So you don't really get the range. So this guy, we actually tested it today. I think we tested it at 0.7 miles. So and that's a clear line of sight.
Yep.
Now, if you're inside of the building, but the whole idea is you could go into a grocery store or a restaurant, and you could go stick this in your walk-in fridge or freezer, and you just basically put this up on right inside that walk-in, and you have connectivity outside of those metal walls. So it's a beautiful thing for installation. And I know people have, they have like their wine cellars, they have their cigar humidors, they have all sorts of, like even a deep freeze at your house. If you want to track that, just buy one of these, stick it in there, and you're done. And the batteries will last for about 2 or 3 years, AA batteries, so it's super easy to swap out.
So you had mentioned something that I was just thinking about from a use standpoint, not only sticking a thermometer probe in there, to have 4 or 5 or 6 of those for my Fireboard 1 that I use all the time. But I have just right to the left of me here a 400 count cigar humidor, like looks like a dorm refrigerator kind of thing for college, but it's a cigar humidor that's been manufactured that way. So I could stick that in there, and then I have, I don't know, it's 2,500 square foot house. I'm in the basement, so if I'm 1 floor above with just floor joists and some flooring above me, this is gonna make it through to the phone or the app to let me know what my humidity is, because humidity is key in the cigar humidor.
Oh yeah. So just to kind of peel back the layers a little bit and explain how this works for people. Again, as I mentioned, this is a 900 megahertz wireless sensor, basically. That transmits over to the Fireboard 2, and there's a little antenna that will essentially give people, but the antenna sticks into the Fireboard 2. The Fireboard 2 can then receive information from all these sensors. So if you had 1 of these, or if you had 30 of these, or whatever you want to do, it go back to the Fireboard 2. And the Fireboard 2 then, of course, has your Wi-Fi connectivity, goes to the cloud. And I think it's worth mentioning, Greg, I mean, this is really just kind of the beginning. So the Fireboard S1G technology. This is the first device, but we have many other devices planned and already under development. And so I think that's key for people. And this is sort of like the revealing of sort of this technology and the power of it, in that it's really better than Wi-Fi with these connected sensors.
I didn't think I was going to ask this question yet, but as you're talking, in my very dim mind is able to start connecting the dots here. Could I assume that Sub 1 is going to be the entrance point into the wireless thermometering for Fireboard, because it's not Wi-Fi getting tamped down? You close a lid and you hear like the meter and some of these other ones, quickly they're out of range. That's been the knock against meter forever. Is this something that you could see being in a scenario of some sort?
I guess I'll just leave it to your imagination, but
I'm taking that as a yes. My imagination running wild, of course.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, the lower the frequency, I was just explaining this to my kids the other day. I was like trying to explain like sound frequency, and you get up to like AM radio. Yeah. I mean, AM radio, you can hear for like hundreds of miles in some scenarios. It's crazy, right? So, I mean, the lower the frequency, the better the range. So I think going this direction is going to be a winning strategy in the long run, but it's hard. It's that some of these devices, you don't get to buy just a Wi-Fi module and stick it on a board and have it work. There's a lot of custom stuff that we've done to make this work. And so all that hard work and technology, that's kind of what I mentioned earlier, where it's taken a little bit more time, but it's a good foundation that we're building for other devices in the future. So I think there's a lot of excitement. And again, I hope our customer base isn't disappointed this isn't like this cooking barbecue thing necessarily, but I mean, I think it works great for that. You can bring this out there if you've got like a barn away from the house and you don't have Wi-Fi connectivity. This is perfect for that.
Yeah.
So I think the use case is really wide and broad.
What's the price point on that?
Yeah, we're just finalizing that, but I think one single unit would be in the $129 range. I think we're going to offer like a 4-pack and maybe a 10-pack that would be at a discount to that, kind of if you divide it out per unit. But I think it's going to be somewhere in that $129 ballpark.
And then from a connectivity standpoint, just to point it out again, you do need to have the Fireboard 2 base unit. And then you could easily just, plug that in somewhere in the corner of the house or whatever and have that be the clearinghouse to get all the data wherever those things are laying, whether they be in deep freeze, refrigerators or humidors or wherever.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. And again, you can then, once you have the Fireboard 2 base station, or, I mean, obviously, we've got this customer base. These guys already own Fireboards. So then they all need to do is just buy the beacon. The antenna essentially comes with it, and you're good to go. And you can add on more beacons down the road if you want to. And it adds to your account just like any other Fireboard device. Like Apple they have a year in their Fireboard account. They have a Fireboard 2 in their Fireboard account. And now they'll have a beacon. Maybe they have a Fireboard Spark. That's our instant read thing. So it'll add just like every other device.
Is there a limit on beacons that are going to be, could I have 80 running at one time, or do they max out somewhere?
Yeah, right now we have sort of a soft limit, and I believe it's at 30 right now. But as the firmware evolves, I think that will go up. Mm-hmm. And if you wanted more than 30, you just have two base stations, and then you'd be set.
What are we looking for a launch? End of the month, end of November? What are we looking at?
Yep. So we are shooting for the end of October, and what we'll do is we will have information posted. So if people who are interested in this product, stay tuned to fireboard.com, and we'll have all the information about the the shipping dates when that's, and all the super finalized pricing and the packaging and all the kits and all that stuff. So we'll have all the information out on our website. So, and we'll do an email blast, of course. And I think maybe in November at some point, Greg, I might maybe catch another show with you if that's okay, and maybe we can talk more about it. So, but yeah, we'll just stay tuned on our website, and we'll have the information.
Ted Conrad is joining us here. Fireboard.com is the website. Always appreciate the support, Ted. Thanks for coming on tonight, and we'll look for you again maybe in a month or so.
Hey, Greg, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
You got it. It's Ted Conrad right there. So if you are chomping at the bit for the new Fireboard beacon, fireboard.com, and stay up to date that way, or just stay tuned to this show. We'll pass along updates and probably have them on in a month or so as they get ready for release and the holiday season. Hey, Chris Young from Combustion Inc. is ready to go. We're going to be talking about a topic that's going to blow your mind. Maybe two topics that will blow both of your minds. Before we get to him, we'll talk about Big Papa Smokers. Listen up, gang. Our friends at Big Papa Smokers have something special just for you, the listeners of this show, whether you're seasoned pitmaster or grilling newbie. Big Papa Smokers is your one-stop shop for all things barbecue, from their championship rubs, mouth-watering sauces, essential accessories. They've got what you need to take your food to the next level. Whether you're a competition circuit person or just a backyard warrior like me, the cherry on top is this. Big Papa Smokers is offering the listeners of the Barbecue Central Show an exclusive deal. Use the code REMPE, R-E-M-P-E. You'll get $10 off your next purchase of $50 or more of rubs, sauces, and accessories. And you can imagine the possibilities. Evaluating your ribs with Big Papa's Sweet Money. You can add Big Papa's Desert Gold to your chicken or vegetables, or better yet, pick up Big Papa's Double Secret to add to your steak. It's delicious. Head on over to BigPapaSmokers.com right now and start shopping and saving today. Don't forget to use code REMPE, R-E-M-P-E, at checkout. Claim your offer of $10 off your next order for $50 or more. Don't forget to check out Big Papa's full line of recipes at cookingwithbigpapa.com. And, of course, follow them on all social media platforms for amazing recipes. We're back with Chris Young right after this. Stick around.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Whole packers, full racks, legs and thighs, injecting butts. If you've never heard this before, you might think you found the best XXX show ever. Let's get back to the most homoerotic host out there today,
listening to Barbecue Central.
All right, we thank Ted Conrad from Fireboard, and now we welcome a brand new sponsor of the show, Aladino Cigars. Oh, holy crap. I can't believe this has happened. A family-run brand, a vertically integrated manufacturer known for its authentic Corojo tobacco, grown at the JRE Tobacco Farms in Honduras. This is the original Cuban seed of Corojo, its flavors, characteristics, all unique, bringing you back to the golden era of cigars in Cuba from 1947 to 1961. Their approach in blending prioritizes flavor to give contemporary smokers like me, like you, a sensational experience with a range of blends, making sure there's something for everyone to enjoy. You can find a retailer near you by visiting jretobacco.com. And if you're interested, if you're a premium hand-rolled cigar smoker and you've heard me talk on and on about Aladino Corojo Reserve specifically, got a box in the mail today. And if you want to try one or two, hit me up on the emails. I'll hook you up. You can see what that Corojo is really like. And I think you'll fall in love with it. Or if you have a retailer near you that you like to visit and they don't carry them, tell them, get on the JRE train. Let's go. Helping me close the show tonight, the founder of the predictive thermometer system and company called Combustion Inc., aside from his disrupting of the wireless thermometering industry, continues to turn out some great content on the YouTube channel as well, which you can be found at youtube.com/@ChrisYoungCooks, which is currently subbing up 93,000 of you. So if you're not subscribed to it, head on over and make sure you hit the subscribe button. Tonight we're talking about something that may or may not help you cook a better steak and may or may not be a huge waste of delicious butter. But let's stop introing it and let's get to talking about it with our pal Chris Young. Chris, before we get into talking about butter basting and all this stuff, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody, which is simply this. Is not returning your cart to the cart corral worse than not covering your grills and cookers?
Yes.
Yes, of course it is.
Having had my car scratched in a parking lot
Oh,
once or twice,
no.
absolutely yes.
Yeah, well, 54% of the YouTube voting public is in disagreement with us. I can't believe it that they're saying covering grills is worse than not returning your cart to the cart corral. But I firmly disagree, and I will stay disagreed with that till the end of the show. We'll track it through the rest of the 35 minutes or so here as the show is running. You've taken on a topic I have long wondered. Why the hell does anyone do that? And I'm talking about the ritual of tossing gobs of butter in a hot cast iron pan and basting a steak over and over and over again. Now, look, aside from the aesthetic, it's never really created enough intrigue on my part to actually try it. But you can't not see the foodie world, an influencer, professional chef, all doing it. Before we dive into the tests and findings, more importantly, do you have any idea who did this first and how it has proliferated through professional kitchens and through social media?
I mean, basting goes back hundreds of years. You can see the tradition at Hampton Court Palace, the royal courts of England. You had spit boys who would use brushes made from herbs to dot butter on the joints of meat going in front of the fire all day. Certainly, you had that going on in French kitchens. I can think of cookbooks going back to the 14th century that mention it. So it's a new technique. It's not, a modern invention. It's the kind of thing that chefs have more or less done as long as they've been cooking in at least in front of fire, but certainly on stovetops.
For those that don't know, you are, I guess, what we would call a classically trained chef, or as I would say, a real-ass chef. When you're coming up and putting in the time and effort, how was it explained to you in the kitchen on why you would want to do this?
I don't even know if it was a restaurant job. I was cooking for a chef named William Malekis in Seattle, and it was just, this is how you do it. This is how we cook our guinea fowl. This is how we do the leg of lamb, base with butter, herbs, and at the end, up on the high boy and rest. When I later was a chef at the Fat Duck for a number of years, we cooked a lot of our meat sous vide because our kitchen was tiny and it was incredibly practical. But again, we would finish frequently in a hot pan, basting with butter, basting with herbs. It's just something that if you do classical Western cooking, you're going to be taught it at some point. It's going to be just how it's done, which I think is even why, I didn't question it for years. It's just one of those things you do sort of almost ritualistically, and I've carried it with me ever since.
So what's the genesis of the test? You've seen it on and on as I has. You were doing it without question.
Yeah.
I've always thought about why the hell would you do it, but never decided to chase it down further than that. What's the impetus?
Yeah, no, I had a friend, Greg Koenig, who reach out to me via direct message on Twitter saying, "Hey, is basting bullshit and just something chefs do to play with their food, or like does it really work? And if so, like what's the right technique?" And I think I was about to just start responding with, "Oh, here's how you do it," and I sort of never really tested it. I've cooked professionally over 10 years in restaurants, and I've been writing about it for another decade and a half, and tried it side by side. And you go on, you Google some things, and you'll see tons of opinions on Reddit and around the internet that, oh, basting speeds cooking, basting makes meat juicier, basting adds flavor, basting cooks more evenly, basting ruins skin, basting makes skin more crispy. And to me, that's all. There's just like, it's something that everybody does, certainly in the chefing world. Maybe not everybody, but almost everybody does it. It's certainly classical canon, and yet it hasn't really been challenged. It hasn't really been tested. So I have a temperature controlled induction burner and some nice Matuyo calipers. So I went down to Costco, got myself a bunch of tenderloins and cut them, exactly the same thickness, and tried to series of experiments for, does it speed cooking? Does it cook more evenly? Does it keep the meat juicier? Does it add flavor? And, I think if you'd asked me at the beginning of the test, I would have said, well, yeah, it speeds cooking and it adds flavor, but it doesn't make it juicier. And I don't really think it cooks more evenly. That would have been my priors, what I believed going in. And there's some nuance to this, which tends to get lost in YouTube, or at least the YouTube comments. But for the most part, There's really nothing special about basting, and you can entirely skip it if you want to. It doesn't make cooking faster.
Can I
Yes, it
interrupt
adds.
just for a
If you
second,
throw a
Chris?
yeah, absolutely.
On the I guess it's a two-headed question on cooking faster or cooking more evenly, and take either one in turn. Is it because it's hot liquid going on top of the steak, so you're getting, let's say, a double action of heat? You have the heat underneath,
Yeah,
obviously, from the
cooking from two
pan, but you now
sides.
have heat from the top.
Yeah, so it turns out that one's a little surprising, and that's one I think I could have done a better job of explaining in the video, because like I definitely confuse people. First thing is, you generally only baste for the last minute or two of the cooking in a pan, because otherwise the butter's going to burn, the herbs are going to burn, right? And so the starting point is like, there's just not much cooking time left to really speed it all that much. But the idea is, yes, you're cooking it from sort of two sides at once. You're putting a lid on evaporative cooling, so you're raising the surface temperature, and it does indeed speed cooking a little bit, but not for the reason people think. Certainly not the reason I initially thought. I had to sort of work out the physics of this to figure out what was going on. You get, for a steak that I wanted 128 degrees Fahrenheit, I'll call it medium rare, on an induction burner at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, which I know sounds low to people, but the same will be true at 400 or 450. You'll just char your meat more. You want to pull it at about 95 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit, 95 degrees Fahrenheit if you're going to baste it. It is going to carry over, that nearly 30, what is that, 34 degrees,
Wow.
And it's going to take about 10 minutes of resting to do that. If you take an unbasted steak, and you pull it off at 95, it will actually not get all the way to 128. It'll stop at around 119, 120, which is pretty rare. Like that's on the blue side of rare. And so if you cook the steak instead of to 95 to 105, 10 degrees hotter, it'll rest to 128. And that takes about an extra minute of cooking. So you go, oh, well, see, it is faster, except it's not, because there's less resting time required. And so by the time you're done resting, it's all a washout. I did this across 12 steaks. Everything was cut. Everything was the same as possible. And all of the steaks finished within 45 seconds of each other, which is enough of a difference that just fluctuations in your pan temperature, the starting temperature of your meat, that'll swamp that. So my conclusion is no, it's not a time saver. Your second question was about evenness. And I think, again, there's a little nuance. It makes it easier to get a bit of color on the sides of your steak. If you have a chicken breast, which is kind of an oddly shaped thing, it lets you get a little more color on the sides, and that's a good thing. It makes it look nicer, and that's maybe a reason to keep basting. But with a tenderloin or a strip steak or even a ribeye, I can sear it on its side. That's not really that hard to do. So the point is, no, basting doesn't make it more evenly. When you cut them open, they look the same. They have the same gradient. And then, yes, if I throw a bunch of herbs and butter in the pan, it adds flavor to the meat. So the real question is not, does it add flavor? The question is there anything magical or special about that flavor? And if you brown some butter with some herbs in it, and then you just brush it on the steak that wasn't basted, and then you do a triangle test, a blind test where you have somebody else set up the plate where two slices one of the steaks and one slice is different, and your job is to figure out the odd man out.
Yep.
I would have had better chance. If I just flipped a coin, I would have had a better chance of picking out which was which. In other words, there's nothing special about basting with adding flavor either. And I really didn't want that to be true. Like that was the one I was like, no, I want this to be more delicious. And so the point is, it isn't faster. It makes it a little easy to get more color on the sides. So maybe that's a point in its favor. It doesn't keep it juicier. You can weigh the steak before and after, unbasted, basted. You lose about 10, 11% of the cooking weight of the steak, no matter what. There's no statistical difference. And you can get, if I was a chef, I would just have a jar of warm brown butter by the, on the high boy, and I would just brush it on the steaks, because butter is kind of expensive. And, restaurants are not exactly high margin places. So my conclusion was, look, there's nothing magical about basting. You can totally skip it, but I'm still probably going to baste, because after 25 years of cooking, it is fun playing with your food. And, spooning wave after wave of butter across my steak is kind of a satisfying thing. There was one surprising finding, though, and this is my rationalization for why I'm going to keep basting. The surface of the meat after resting was substantially hotter. After 10 minutes of resting, the unbasted steak was like lukewarm on the surface. The basted steak was still about 120 degrees. It was still pleasantly warm. So putting all that extra oil, slowing down evaporation does, it's a little bit of an insulating blanket of delicious butter over your steak. And to me, that's enough reason to keep using obscene amounts of butter in the kitchen.
So is the butter, this is my simple mind work. You can tell me where I'm wrong here.
Yep.
But if you're doing it and you let it sit, to me, the butter is going to, start to congeal, for lack of a better word. So is it keeping the heat like just underneath the surface, more like a butter blanket, or how's that working?
It is working like that. So the way to think about it is butter. Once you've browned the butter, there's no water left in it. It's pretty much butter oil.
Right.
And oil and water don't mix. And the way your food mostly cools off when you're resting it is sweating. That water evaporating from the surface, just like sweating on a hot Midwestern day cools you off, the sweat cools the food off too. And by putting that layer, that blanket of oil over the surface, you slow down that evaporative cooling, which is actually why resting takes longer, but you keep that surface warmer. So you're losing less heat, which is, again, why the resting takes longer, and it turns out it's not faster. But for me, the worst thing in the world is to have a steak that looks perfect. It's perfectly done, but I put that slice in my mouth and it's cold. That sucks.
Yeah. Anything else in this that you, so here's what I'm thinking. I'm totally now disinterested in ever basting the steak, number one, even if it's hotter on the surface. Number two, if I was in a restaurant, I would circumvent this whole process by, as you said, putting butter up on the high boil, letting it melt. I'd probably just jam a bunch of thyme sprigs in it and infuse the butter, or make my own infused butter, and then just paint it on. Out it goes. Everybody thinks I've done this magical stuff. Is there anything else in this test that you were surprised, or you expected one thing and it's proven out another?
As I said, I was surprised by how ineffective basting was, and I think I agree with you. If I had the job of making a restaurant profitable, I'd sort of do it like there's a great place called Jeff's Texas Barbecue out here in Washington State, and they have a fantastic smoked turkey breast. And after they slice it, they dip those slices of turkey breast in warm molten smoky fat, and it's like that is liquid gold. So just do that, right? Like that's all you need to do. I think the thing that sort of enraged people about the video is I point out I'm cooking the steak from raw. I'm flipping it every 30 seconds in a pan, and I set the temperature of the pan to 325
You know
degrees
where I'm going with my next question, of course.
I know.
Yes.
I know from experience that if I have the pan hotter, the surface will be burned by the time that 1.5 inch thick steak is cooked all the way through. I get a perfectly good crust, at 325 degrees when I'm flipping it every 30 seconds for 10 minutes. Each flip builds up the crust. The benefit of flipping frequently, aside from more evenness, is, you sometimes get bald spots on the crust. Well, the next flip, you move the bald spot, and so it evens out. So I have some line where I said, don't believe the kitchen bullshit that you need a ripping hot pan to sear your steak. And I touched a nerve. I think there's a hit squad that Reddit's got out there looking for me, because that's just one of these things that people want to deeply believe.
Yep.
And it turns out it's not nearly as important. A ripping hot pan doesn't make that much of a difference, except it does make your kitchen smokier. You're actually speed limited by how fast you can sear the surface by water. The surface of the steak, whether it's a 400 degree pan or a 350 pan or a 600 degree pan, is actually just a little bit above 212 degrees, the boiling point of water. And the Maillard reaction mostly happens below 300 degrees Fahrenheit. When you get the surface of a steak above 300 Fahrenheit, you're making charcoal. You're into pyrolysis. And this is an arguable difference, but if I do a steak on a charcoal grill, ripping hot, I get some charcoal. I get some charring on the surface. And up to a point, that can be pleasant. It tastes different than a pan-seared steak.
Yeah.
But that's just charring. And I can get that done in a 325 pan. I can get it done in a 350 pan. I can get it done in a 400 pan. And all of those pan temperatures, If I spend the same amount of time searing to get the crust, say a minute of searing, I get about the same amount of crust. I overcook about the same amount. The only difference is how much charring I get. And so when people say, well, you got to have a ripping hot pan, what they're really telling you is they like a little char on their steak. And on a grilled steak, I love a little char. On a pan roasted steak, I don't like char so much. Just the way I learned, just the way I cook.
So it appears
that's another YouTube video that will piss people off.
Yeah, well, I can't wait to have you back on after you do that so we can dig into it a little deeper. So when I sous vide my steaks, and then as they're getting ready to finish, I'll get the Primo ceramic cooker fired up to 700 degrees, and then I'm, 30 seconds flip, 30 seconds flip, 30 seconds flip, 30 seconds flip. Usually I'm good to go from there. So I'm not putting myself in a burn position at that point, even though I am, quote unquote, ripping hot.
Yeah. And so, if I've got my Komodo or my I'm using a Weber at the moment for just a classic Weber charcoal grill, if I'm grilling a steak, sure, it'll be hot and I want a little of that charring on the edge, and that, I will start from sous vide, or I'll start from a reverse seared steak. That's probably the biggest difference, is pre-cooking the meat is going to give you a better sear because the proteins are denatured. They're more reactive at the surface. If you were to compare a steak cooked from raw versus one you've pre-sous vide or reverse seared, you're going to get a much better crust on the pre-cooked one. So I think that's an argument to always do it. But ultimately, the temperature of your sear doesn't matter that much, except it'll make your kitchen smokier. What it really is doing is how much char do you want on your steak? You want a lot of char? Get it really hot. It'll help. But if you just want a nice mired crust, you don't need to be that hot.
Shaking,
and I know that'll be controversial, but go try it.
Shaking the very foundations of what you thought about steak cooking, both in temperature to sear, and then, of course, this butter basting stuff that's been going on forever, is our pal Chris Young from Combustion Inc. How's business these days?
Good. We're actually we are sold out of some of our products a little bit earlier, so we're scrambling to get back in stock. But it's going well. We've got a bunch of new software updates coming. The second generation prediction engine will be coming in November, and it is putting the foundation in for us to predict the stall. We in our laptop experiments, our development environments, we can now predict the barbecue stall. It's going to be a few more months before we have that loaded into the probe, but barbecue stall prediction, carryover cooking, all of that is coming, and there'll be some new things to announce next year too.
Do you have are you experiencing supply chain issues as far as getting stuff to meet the needs?
I will say it is better than it was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
During COVID, that was crazy. Now it's still, you have to plan, a lot of the components, we have to place the orders 6 months out. So our biggest problem as a new company that has a bit of a hit product is, 6 months ago, we kind of had to guess how many would we sell in September, how many would we sell in October. We guessed wrong, and so for the all summer we've been scrambling and scouring the world to find everything we need, and paying slightly exorbitant prices to get those components expedited to us. But that's our problem, not our customers' problem.
You expecting to see an uptick for the holidays?
Yes. I mean,
yeah.
We've been sort of seeing an uptick every month since we started shipping. So now we're sort of expecting the holidays maybe much bigger than we expected, and customers seem really happy. We're happy with the reviews, and the complaints we get are people basically saying they love it so much they want it to do even more, which is always a good problem to have. And so when I'm not making YouTube videos, I'm working with the math team trying to make the predictions the best in the world.
Check out the YouTube video. If you're just tuning in now, you're hearing us talking about maybe you should or shouldn't be basting steak. Go to youtube.com/@ChrisYoungCooks, and you can check out that video and all his other stuff that he's working on. All great videos, by the way, very professionally done, high production value, which I appreciate. And you can see him here on the show every once in a while breaking down those videos in depth. Combustion Inc. Combustion.inc is the website, by the way.
Yep.
Anything else before I let you go?
Greg. Nope. Thanks for having me back. Look forward to seeing you after the next controversy.
Can't wait. It's Chris Young right there. Combustion.inc is the website. So if you're into predictive wireless thermometers, that's one you certainly want to take a look at. And if you're into high-level production of myth busting on a whole bunch of different topics, then Chris's YouTube channel is one you want to subscribe to. Almost 100,000 Probably be there in the next couple weeks or so. All right, let's go ahead and get out of here all the way back in the first hour. We had Mark Williams from Swine Life BBQ doing a little pinch hit for Malcom Reed, who's out at some creator conference in Texas or wherever he's at. Great to catch up with Mark and see what he's up to. SwineLifeBBQ.com is his website if you want to check it out and buy some of his products. And then, for the first time in 5 years, Melissa Cookston made a reappearance on the show. We talked about Memphis in May. We talked about her retiring from competition barbecue. We talked about if her husband is going to be also retiring or if he'll continue. We talked about the barbecue supply store. We talked about the World Junior Barbecue League World Championship going on October 22nd. Second hour, Ted Conrad from Fireboard.com, and close it out with Chris Young from Combustion Inc. That's combustion.inc, website-wise. And then his YouTube is youtube.com/@ChrisYoungCooks, where you can check out that basting steak video that we were breaking down. Big show planned for you next week. Meathead will be around. Robert Moss will be around. And then I believe in the second hour, Aaron Franklin for both segments. What? How do I always leave you? September 11th, 2001. I will never forget. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Good night now.
Hi, this is Austin Parsons, pitmaster with Smoky Mountain Q in Nashville, Tennessee, and you are listening to the Barbecue Central Show.